Welcome to Western Insights. Today's show is brought to you by Western's College of Business and Economics in partnership with the Western Alumni Association and Foundation. Our intention with Western Insights is to extend our expertise far beyond the classroom with our own internal subject matter experts and external guests. Today, we're going to spend some time exploring how to connect with your career, finding joy, value, and purpose in the day-to-day. The COVID-19 pandemic and many economic factors have led to great instability in global workplaces. Managers must navigate financial restrictions and changing employee expectations while maintaining a culture of innovation. Employees and those looking to become an employee have been forced to navigate a variable and changing set of expectations of what a workplace looks like and may expect. Graduating college often feels like a path to finding the dream job. For most, though, the post-graduation career takes many ambiguous twists and turns and doesn't always turn out the way people expect. This can leave some feeling a disconnect between their dream job and their day job. This is where we begin today. Our panel will be discussing how to find joy, value, and purpose that aligns with your work, whether you're in your first role or your 10th. The panel will discuss the trials and tribulations of navigating career choices, finding purpose in any job, and what success really means. We do encourage you to ask questions today. And don't wait for the last minute. They always come at the last minute. You don't want to be that person. Use the Q&A button in your Zoom toolbar. Let us know where you're looking for more information. Closed captioning is available for this event. You may activate this feature at any time by using the closed captioning button in your menu bar. To help us along in our discussion today about connecting with your career, we have Liz Delano, who is the Manager of Communications at BAE Systems, Inc., an international defense, aerospace, and security company. Liz graduated from Emmanuel College in Boston with a degree in business management before obtaining an MBA from Suffolk University Sawyer Business School. After graduating from Emmanuel, Elizabeth joined Matter Communications as an account coordinator and took roles of increasing scope in communications, account management, and public relations. Elizabeth has taken these PR skills to BAE Systems, where she has owned both internal and external communications for the amphibious combat vehicle for the U.S. Marine Corps, the U.S. Navy, and the U.S. Army. Elizabeth's work has been featured in Business Wire, Yahoo Finance News, and NASDAQ Market Matter. Annie Inoyo is the Director for Digital Strategy and Executive Communications for DirecTV, and she has extensive experience in both customer and employee-facing communications. Annie graduated from the Boston University College of Engineering with a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering before joining AT&T. Annie took a series of roles at AT&T, starting with their college hire rotational program before joining communications and public relations organization. Annie supports the C-suite executive team of the newly independent DirecTV, which was spun off from AT&T, and now holds responsibility over the DirecTV rollout of Workplace by Meta, and reporting and creative suite for all corporate communications. Annie is an active part of the Boston and Dallas communities, a global thinker with a home base in both the US and Lagos, Nigeria, and is passionate about connecting leaders with issues that matter to employees. Our conversation today is going to be facilitated by Western's own Morgan Whidden, who's the Director of Professional and Career Readiness within the College of Business and Economics. Morgan graduated from Boston University with a BS in Mechanical Engineering before earning her Master's in Education from the Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College at Arizona State University. As a first-generation college student herself, Morgan's passionate about developing an equitable and accessible professional development program that allows all students to feel confident in their career journey. This is an exciting panel. I'm really excited to hear this, Morgan, today. So Morgan, let's dive in.
Absolutely. Thank you, James. So Annie, Liz, like James said, we're talking today about finding joy in your day-to-day and recognizing that maybe what we thought we would be doing isn't what we are doing, but we still want to be engaged. To do that, can you all give a little context? And Annie, I'll start with you. How did you get into your current position? And is it where you thought you would be when you got your degree?
Yes, so I think I'll answer the second question first. It is not where I thought I would be when I started. But I think what's really interesting is if I kind of like glance back to my senior year in undergrad, doing our capstone project, working on new devices, building a business plan for it. I think back then I paid a lot of attention on how we presented the information and the story that we put together. And so even without me knowing, I think I was always kind of leaning towards presentation, events, putting stories together aligned with the technology that's in the background. So coming out of college, I went into AT&T's rotational program. So that allowed me to hop between multiple jobs and really figure out what I did want to do with my degree. And so the current job I have, I actually got it just by emailing the hiring supervisor. So I emailed them, the rec had already closed, but I just shared my interest. I was like, hey, I'm really super interested in what you're doing with that team. I want to learn more about what you do. It wasn't even about getting the job, but just in our conversation about what the new communication plan could be, I ended up actually officially applying and getting into the role today.
Liz, do you want to take over?
Yeah, absolutely. So likewise, where I am is not where I thought I would be. I actually started my college journey thinking I was going to be a nurse, and I started taking basic science classes. And the best thing I did was I volunteered at Boston Children's Hospital, which was a fantastic experience, but it made me realize, just based on my skills, nursing was not for me. Nursing is an absolute angel career path, and I have the utmost respect, but I get queasy with blood, and I quickly realized I literally cannot do this. So that said, I transitioned to, Manual offers a more or less a general business degree that covers various different aspects of business, kind of gives you a taste in everything. So while I still wasn't sure what I wanted to do, I felt like this would be a good path to give me the most options. And it absolutely has given me the most options. That said, my current career in communications and public relations, interestingly, I actually never took a PR or communications class. So here we are, it's still worked out, but it just goes to show the path is never what you think it's going to be.
Absolutely. And that sets us up beautifully for the entry into this conversation. And I know a lot of people use the frame dream job. We use a lot of language around what do you want to do at any stage in a career. Liz, what do you think are some of the misconceptions that come with talking about dream jobs?
I think my biggest misconception was I felt like it was something I deserved right away. So I thought I was checking all the right boxes. I went to college. I'm keeping my opportunities open. I need to graduate with my dream job, and it needs to be high paying and everything I thought it was going to be. And I quickly realized, and it sounds cliche, and I'll probably use a lot of cliches throughout this conversation, but they're often true. Life is a marathon, not a sprint. And what you thought you wanted might not be the same as what you have. And also it's a journey. You take every opportunity and learn from what's presented, and eventually it'll get you to where you want to go.
Absolutely. And I think that leads us into this idea of success, right? We want to be successful right when we graduate. And I know that the term emotional success is one that's been being tossed around quite a bit in regards to career journeys, and emotional success being the balance of the give and take of life. Annie, for you, what do you do to create emotional success, not just career success?
Yeah, I love that phrase, because it's not just about, what you do. Like, we're human beings, not human doings. So like a lot of what we bring to the office is our emotional self. I feel for me, one way I really lean into that is honestly just finding friends in the company I work for, and then outside of the company I work for. And this is what I mean by that, because I think a lot of times we talk about building relationships or networking, finding mentors, finding sponsors or advisors, and those are all great things, and those all have purpose. But I think we also need to spend a little bit more time finding peers that we can relate to. And it doesn't even have to be in your company, especially if you're new to that company. It might be hard to find people that you can talk to outside of work hours about things that are going on in the office, but even friends that have maybe similar jobs or work in companies of similar sizes, things like that. Like having someone I can go to vent or to get advice from on a peer level about maybe an email I had to send or a meeting I had to host, that understands what it means to send an email to a certain group like that or host a meeting of that size, is very helpful emotionally for me as a leader going into the company. So I feel like from your first job, like from entry level, from even internships, finding peers that you can also kind of do this with is definitely really helpful as well.
And I know we've talked about this in the past, are your peers, are they always folks that is it an age thing? Is it an experience thing? Is it a job thing?
Good question. I think first I wanted it to be an age thing, because you do high school, you go to college, and you're always in a room of people that are like 1 to 2 years off from your age. Maybe grad school is a little bit more of a gap, but still around the same age. And then with work, it really could be a big gap. between who is just relating to you the most. So some people I'm really close with, they're same age, we graduated the same time, we just ended up being in the same industry, and so I connect with them that way. There's some people that are like 10 years older than me, and our role, what we do for the companies, is very similar, and our personalities just happen to align. And I lean into that as well. Like, just because someone is older than you doesn't mean you can't relate with them as a peer. And it's very funny to see how age no longer becomes like a differentiator when you enter the workplace.
Absolutely. Liz, what about you? What do you do for your professional development? You're feeling stagnant, you're feeling stuck in your job. What's your go-to?
For me, I'm very fortunate that my current employer really prioritizes professional development, and we get a yearly stipend for how much we can spend. I actually, it's pretty awesome. I actually paid for my MBA that way as well, so I was able to pay for the entire thing through their education reimbursement. So I ask for it. I look for classes that interest me, and again, this is probably relatively unique, but I don't think exclusive to my current employer. I can have very frank discussions with my manager if I want to change my position. So I've bounced around quite a bit to try different things. I think Annie mentioned earlier a rotational program. We have something similar where you can literally try out a different job for a couple of weeks, pending management approval and what's going on. But there's always, I've been fortunate in my current opportunity, at least, to always have a venue for, going outside of my current role and just testing the waters of what might interest me. And that's been pretty cool.
That's awesome. And building off of that, Liz, for those folk, one of the questions that came in from the audience is, what do you do while you're waiting for the next job? So there is that waiting period, especially in mid-career and in later career, where you can't just move anymore. What do you recommend people do, or what have you done to really engage and root in the space you're in, even if it's not a perfect fit?
That's a great question, because it can be hard. It can be really challenging to wait. And I know, especially if you feel like you're doing all the right things and things aren't falling into place, it can be frustrating. So I think it's going to sound silly, but I think part of it is emotional management, just realizing that continuing to believe that you're doing the right things, it's going to happen, you're going to get to that next step, and continuing to just look for the opportunities that will get you there, and having patience, unfortunately, in the moment when it's not happening, but being open to looking for different opportunities in the meantime that might help you get to the step you're on. But it can be frustrating. It can be very frustrating.
Absolutely. Annie, same idea. But how do you know when to move on? When is it done? When is it you can no longer make it work and you got to go?
That's hard. I think definitely the work culture is oftentimes when the last straw an employer has or an employee has when they're deciding to move. And that honestly is just so different for everyone. But I think in general, even when things are feeling a bit bumpy, sometimes it's seasonal. And so sometimes it's never this is just going to be a horrible crunch time for the whole year. And so you might not know if it's completely time to fully separate from that job or not. But I would say I got advice from one of my directors years back, and he was like, every 6 months, regardless of whether you feel good in your job or not, or whether you're happy in the role or not, or you're thinking about promoting or a lateral, always just revise your resume and always look externally. Not saying that that's, you're going to look to leap and leave the company, but just see what the industry needs, see what the industry has, especially now that I feel like with work from home and some of the technology companies that are out there, the jobs change so quickly. So things that are jobs today weren't even jobs 5 years ago. So just getting an idea of what other companies are looking for, or what job titles are even out there that you can search for, that should become just a routine for anyone, regardless of whether you feel good or not. That way, if you are thinking about moving out, it's less of an emotional decision, and it's just something that you're always thinking about, something that you're always looking for.
And that is so such an important piece of what we were talking about prior to this is looking at the way that the world is changing. And I know I've talked to all of you about the idea of remote work and hybrid work. And there's been a few studies that have come out that have shown that remote work is one of the major things that graduates are looking at. And I know for a fact it is one of the major things that mid-career folk, especially those with families or commitments at home, are wanting to stay in. They want to be at home a lot of the time. And I think there's pros and cons that we've all talked about. For you, Annie, what do you think? How has remote, how has hybrid, this different landscape, how's that affected engagement at work and community at work?
Yeah, I can talk about it from both lenses, because I was when I was working mostly in the office, it was every day in the office, and it was a very traditional corporate environment where you had cubicles, you had offices, like we had I worked at the headquarter building, so everyone was commuting to go to that building, versus now, and you can see I am in my home office. And I'm actually living in a city that's outside of our hub city. So I'm not even hybrid, I'm fully remote. I will say, being remote, there is flexibility with your time. So things like commuting or dealing with traffic, like that no longer becomes like an issue, and you get those hours back. But I do think that with the flexibility, because it's still so new for a lot of people, there's almost a lack of structure that can happen. So, even when we do get remote positions, I would say treat it with the same structure as if you were going in office. Like when you were in office or online, like treat it like you were truly online. Like, yes, we might have to like go get lunch together, but be very mindful of how you parse out your day to make sure that you're fully present while you're working. And then honestly, the same for out of office, because I think that also can kind of blend the lines with working from home, because you are at home. So if you are off, close the laptop, maybe mute the notifications on your phone for all of the apps that are work apps, to make sure you have that difference. So I think that's one of the cons, is sometimes work kind of bleeds into your life. But I think it's also giving employees the flexibility to choose where they want to work. Because I know some people do co-working spaces, or they, if they travel, they can now bring their work with them and still keep up to date with work. So that's definitely a need, but there's also some cons with connecting with other employees and finding community virtually versus in person. Yeah,
absolutely. And you've said it before, that some of the folk that you talk to the most are the people that you worked with in the office prior to being remote. Liz, what about you for remote work and hybrid? How have you seen it affect engagement? How do you feel?
Yeah, personally, I love it. It just fits my personal life so well. However, I do fully recognize that it's not for everyone. And I also empathize to those graduating and jumping into fully remote environments. I think there is something to be said for in my current position. I largely work from home. However, I do go into the office maybe once or twice a week, but it's largely based on what's going on for the day. I love that flexibility. I think that's the biggest thing. However, I did meet a lot of people beforehand, and then I had those connections already to connect more regularly online. So I think probably if you are going to a fully remote position, I can't emphasize enough the importance of still, Annie said it as well, still making the effort to engage, even though you're quote unquote alone in your home office. Reach out to people on whatever platform you might have. We use Skype, there's Microsoft Teams, there's chat features, you can text, call, and make those casual interactions that you're missing from the office. I do think those still matter in relationship building and just expanding your network within the company. And I mean, Annie said it as well, work from home offers amazing flexibility, but it is noticeable when you're not actually there. So that's just, people think all you have to do is flick your mouse and people will not notice. We notice when you're not online.
And to the community building, I feel like as casual conversations online, like you might have to actually just schedule a recurring casual conversation. So like there are people that I've met only online. I've never actually even met them in person, but we work together. But I found out every time I'm talking to them, it's a business meeting. And I'm like, I have no idea what this person's like, but they seem cool and I want to connect with them a bit more. And so I just schedule like monthly meetings or weekly meetings, depending on how close I am with the person. And that's how I catch up with people. So that works too.
That's great. And that actually leads to a question that came in from the audience, was this idea of proximity bias. So employees who are physically close to their supervisors get more face time, and therefore there's a easier perception of success. And it's easier to say like, okay, maybe the in-person person is doing more and maybe deserves the promotion, maybe deserves the next step, maybe deserves the additional leadership responsibility or whatever they're seeking. What do you recommend for folk who would prefer to be remote and want to like stay at home, but they also want to have that connection and make sure that their successes are being seen? Do you have any tips, Annie?
I do. You have to be very intentional with how you communicate. I don't want to say scientific, but there's a hearts and science to it, you know? I think when it comes to your direct supervisor, I'll start there. You need to understand what makes you feel comfortable as an employee and what makes you feel valued or seen or heard. And so I've had conversations with my boss where I'm like, hey, like I know we talk every other week and we have the team meeting, but I actually want to talk every week. And because I don't feel like I'm saying enough to you. Now they're completely aware of what I'm doing. I just didn't feel like they were. So I was like, please, can we change our meetings to every week and we'll catch up every Friday or something? Like, don't be afraid to like, create your own schedule and routine with your direct leader. And then even outside of like phone calls or meetings, like sending them updates of, hey, just wrapped up this thing, like check it out. And just giving them like a mini report card of like the work you're doing that month or the work you're doing that week, outside of what they require you to, report out on. Like you can send them informal updates. And it might not even just be your direct supervisor. It could be other leaders you work with and things like that. But then I think what's probably not talked about a lot is like the other company things, like the culture, optional meeting, or like maybe affinity groups or volunteering or just other spaces that employees that are available virtually. I think you should do those things. Like I'm pretty sure, James and Morgan know which people are joining these webinars regularly. And that's another way of saying like, hey, like this person emailed me and I noticed their name because they've previously been attending this series. Like leaders are paying attention to who's engaging and who's just doing their work and going home. So I think just being part of other optional events that the company's having is another way to let them know like, hey, I'm here, I'm willing to be a part of this community.
Mm-hmm. And I love how you bring up the list too, because it's like, if they aren't paying attention, you're going to bring them back to the fact that you are successful. Like, yes, you're doing these soft things on the side, but also, hey, as a reminder, I am a functional, successful employee, and here are my metrics that go with it. I know you've been doing that for years. Liz, do you have anything you want to add? Like, how do you show your success remotely, or how do you connect to your supervisor remotely or your peers?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think Annie covered a lot of the big recommendations. I think those are spot on. I will say I'll share 2 anecdotes. In my current position, the office that I work in California, is completely remote from the beginning, from the entire team for that matter. So I've never actually sat in the same office as my immediate supervisor, nor anyone on my team. And our whole team is more or less laid out that way, with the exception of 1 or 2 folks that are together. And in my current position, even if we were together, frankly, we have so much other stuff going on that I probably wouldn't really even see them on a regular basis, other than hey, how was your weekend? Which I'm doing already on our staff calls, or messaging them casually through Skype, or we have like a WhatsApp chat that's a little more informal to stay connected. In my job before this, however, it was a very tight-knit office and most people were at the headquarter office. So that said, we did have a couple of remote employees before remote was even really a thing. And while those individuals were obviously left out of the in-office culture, they were still promoted. They were still proving their work. And that's the biggest thing. If you're still contributing and going above and beyond in your work, and it shows, and your voice is still coming over email or through the actual action of your job, it's going to speak for itself.
Love that. That's a very positive reminder that you just keep doing you, keep showing you. Liz, I'm going to go to the next topic of like disconnect and reconnecting. Can you speak to a time that you felt disconnected in your own job, and what did you do to reconnect and really reconnect in that role without having to transition quite yet?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's tough. I have felt this way before, and the best advice I can give is trying to reconnect with your own purpose and aligning it with your job. So it's not always going to work out, but you might be surprised about which pieces do. So for example, I really care about the environment, and surprisingly, because I feel like it's not something you would necessarily expect, I work in the defense industry, and my company really cares about meeting a net carbon zero goal by 2030. And we have a plan to do this, and I volunteered to be involved with the communications on that. And that was my way of like kind of connecting with something that I care about on a personal level that I was able to find through my job. Now that might not always happen. Sometimes it requires some outside the box thinking and just, being open to new opportunities. But I think it often is there. And then I'll also add connecting to your colleagues, being open to connect to others on your team. And maybe, I don't necessarily enjoy sending certain emails that I have to send regularly, but I can laugh about it with my colleague, and it's, all better at that point. So those are just two quick pieces of what might help.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And a question came through about leadership and developing your own leadership opportunities. And it sounds like that's exactly what you're doing, is you're finding like your core values and you're seeing how you can put that into your workplace. Annie, building off of that, what are your thoughts on the development of yourself outside of work? So when we talk about developing our leadership opportunities, when we talk about reconnecting, it's so often work related. Do you think there's any value in shifting the focus to being outside of your day-to-day job?
Oh, that's a hard question. I think a lot of the development I do ends up being work related, or like directly related to like not even work, just like the exact role I'm in to just help me do better at my job. But tying back to what Liz said, like understanding your passions and what even I think we say passions, but like it could even mean hobbies. Like what do you genuinely enjoy doing and what do you like doing, and leaning into that, like that has a lot of powerful momentum that it could even spill into work. So for me, one example I can give is I'm really into like just anything that's visual, like a visual production, like looking at events. Like I'll be at a concert, but I'll be paying attention to the like screens, and I'm like, oh, it's interesting how they like tied the lights to the, I love doing that stuff. So I got into volunteering at my church, running tech and getting into like the production side, and that actually spilled into work because we had a huge event back when we were in person. And I was like, hey, like, do you guys need help? Like, like I'm just kind of like peering in and just offering my services. They looked like they were busy and ended up helping out some teams there. And so now that we're virtual and doing productions for live events at work is a lot more important, because you really need to make sure the tech aligns. Like that has now become most of what I do today for the team. So I think even just giving yourself opportunities to learn about things that you're genuinely interested in, whether it's like, hey, I'm following this guy on YouTube that teaches me how to do this, or like actually taking a class in your community. I think that that's also a fun way to bring that into work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when y'all are talking about engagement, so much of it is personal focus in your own, like, how am I engaging back in the space? What about when we're engaging with people who are around us, or asking them to engage with our own projects, or we want to build community in our own space, and especially with soft authority? So one of the questions that came through from the audience was talking about volunteers, and how do you create a positive culture and get volunteers to really root in, enjoy their day, feel good about what they're doing, but still get the work done. And I know we've talked about corporate volunteering to some degree, of getting people to agree to do your projects, even if you're not their exact manager, getting them to join you in the journey of getting something done. Annie, what do you do to get those folk feeling really committed and in a good place?
That's a good question, because I think the longer you're probably in a company, I think the more you realize that like maybe managing up or managing around, or like basically like telling or asking people to do things, but you're not their supervisor, like that becomes really a big part of your role. And sometimes it's just getting like 2 other people on your team to support you on a project, but sometimes it's like you need to launch something and you're like, yeah, I need people to join this tool. I need people to actually also follow our carbon zero plan that, you know, that Liz is doing. Like, you need people to rally. And so I think a good way, one, you have to be very honest. Like trying to put on like a cheerleader face of like, everything's great and just, you know, like join it because it's great and it's awesome. I feel like people can read how authentic you are. So like showing them like, hey, I'm launching this new thing. I don't have anybody on board. I think these are the great things. I think these are the things that are not so great, but we'll figure it as we go. Like little things like bringing your real emotions into it are helpful. But then I think that's also where your network kind of plays to your favor. So like the other peers that are not in your team that you know, grab coffee with on the weekend, or you do like monthly Zoom calls, like getting those people involved, like word of mouth is very powerful, even in the workplace, and just asking for opinions, and then finding a way to just kind of broadcast like an open calling pass. Like a lot of people are actually willing to sign up for things, they just don't know they exist. And so using your teams and asking like leaders to help you just spread the word, I think could be really powerful too.
Absolutely. Talking about like community engagement, getting your work community engaged. I know we had talked about affinity groups earlier. Liz, is there anything happening at your company that you're really loving, or anything that you've seen companies do? And then Annie, I'm going to move that question right on over to you afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. So my current company, and I think it's becoming more popular at many companies for that matter, has an employee engagement group where it's led by employee volunteers, but they plan events for each local site. And if there's remote employees as well, there's a separate group for more virtual events. That's still kind of up and coming, which I hope to see that shift a little bit more. But for example, I was just invited to virtual yoga next Thursday, so we'll see how that goes. But there is an effort to engage all different types of employees and meet us where we are, which is the biggest thing. There's also employee resource groups, which are a little more narrowed down by, like, we have a women's support network for working women, a veterans support network for veterans in the workplace. There's like 7 different ones for different backgrounds, and those have been fantastic. They do regular webinars and send out newsletters and engage employees that way. That said, I've been very pleasantly pleased to see the efforts that we've gone through. Previous employers, largely the focus was on happy hours and drinking events, which as a immediate college graduate, I really enjoyed and I thought was great. But however, in retrospect, I realized that's actually not super inclusive. That creates a pressure around and a focus around drinking, when really that's not really for everyone and shouldn't be for everyone. And there really needs to be more offered than just that. So I was pleasantly surprised to see the amount of activities that the various groups come up with.
Absolutely. Especially, I mean, different phases of life, right? Having kids, getting closer to retirement, like you have different expectations. So to see that variety is great. Annie, is there anything that you've seen? And it can be DirecTV, it can be elsewhere, anything that you've just seen, you're like, that's a really powerful way to get folk invested in their jobs and to feel good.
Yeah. I think one thing I've seen, not DirecTV, but I think just around the industry, is there's almost like a sense of, now I get it, it's not what's driving the business forward, but I do feel as though we see connecting in community as optional when it comes to the workforce. And so this is a bunch of companies, but I know of companies that actually require it for leaders. So you have your sales, or whatever your finance goals are, and then in that same scorecard, you also have a score for communication, or like hosting community events, or collaborating, like some sort of collaboration score tied to certain leadership levels. And I think that's something I wish were more mandatory, where we require leaders to not just focus on, what the business is producing and the outcome, but also employees. Like, what are you doing to communicate with your employees? What are you doing to host virtual events or in-person events, or, like trying to bring the human side of working back into like a more mandatory required state.
And we just had a question come through off of that, of how do you create your own leadership opportunities if you're remote? And I think even to expand on that thought is, these are great things that companies are doing, and this is a cool transition that companies are having, or even when we talked earlier, like jump into what your company is doing, fabulous. But what if your company is not necessarily doing something that fits you? How do you think an employee could go about building their own leadership opportunity, like a ground up movement? What do you think is the best pathway, or have you seen it happen that you're like, ooh, that's awesome? And maybe we'll start with Liz. I'm throwing this on you randomly.
No,
So
I love this question. This is a
okay, good, great.
great question. I would offer, I think I'll go back to making yourself known. So showing your work is probably the first and foremost, and volunteering for stuff that you're not just told to do. So for example, this is a really low-hanging fruit example, but I want to lead the next weekly staff call. I want to own the agenda and take the actions. And I want my voice to be the main driver of that, even if I'm not the one that's communicating the main topics, but I'm leading the call and I'm taking charge. Any way you can show that you're going you're thinking above and beyond about where you might bring value, and showing that'll go a long way. And then I would also offer, again, I'm a huge fan of remote work. I will always fight for it. But if there is an opportunity to meet in person with, whether it be your supervisor or one of your colleagues, whether you live in the same city and you say, hey, do you want to go get lunch on Tuesday? I think there's a lot of value in that. Or there's often opportunities in my current job to travel. So I've been fortunate where I'll travel to trade shows, for example, and that's an opportunity to meet a lot of people. If you have those opportunities, definitely still take them, because there are conversations and just that in person. Oh, hey, I noticed you have a cat on the background of your phone. You like cats? Like, I don't know, just stuff you would not notice virtually that does still matter, that if you do have the opportunity to take those, because that's how you spark other conversations virtually, and that's how you get remembered. So you don't have to, but I do think it goes a long way if you can.
Yeah, those are really good points. I think the only thing I would add, because really that what she said is basically what you need to do. But I would add two things. One, if you're trying to expand, or whether it's like for leadership or for a special project, your current role has to be 10 out of 10. Like if your day-to-day work, if you're not delivering, or if you're under delivering on what your just standard job is, the leader won't trust you to take on extra work. Like if you look like you're always late on the report, or you're emailing it 1 minute before the deadline, I don't know that I would be like, am I sure I want to give this person extra work? Could they handle it? So just make sure that, you're coming into the office, you're putting in your work, you're making sure your deliverables are on par. And then the second thing, which sounds very silly, but be sure that you are actually willing to take it on. Because a lot of times people raise their hand to point out problems, and oftentimes the leadership would be like, all right, you can lead that, go ahead and lead that solution. And so just, keep an open eye. Like if you raise your hand, you could actually end up being the head of that new project that you feel like the company needs.
Yeah, Annie, that sparked something for me too, that that's such a good point, that you really need to be doing 100% in your current role. That said, sometimes when you're doing 100%, you can be forgotten about, because maybe not forgotten about, but not thought about as much, because you're doing great. We don't need to worry about you. You're awesome. You make my life easier. So sometimes one of the best pieces of advice I got was, we know you're a workhorse, but sometimes you have to be the show pony. And that goes back to what Annie was saying earlier about taking metrics and showing your value, creating those regular meetings, and just saying, I just want to talk to you and check in, and here's what I'm doing, and XYZ.
Liz, that phrase, I'm quoting you from whoever you are quoting. That is it's such a great visual to represent it. And it does bring me to this thought though, that as we're talking about finding value in your workday and feeling good, if you aren't feeling good in your job and you don't want to give 100% and you are barely making it to the door, do you think that there is still value in pushing an extracurricular and saying, hey, I know I'm struggling in my job, but I'd really love to lead the employee resource group on environmentalism? Like, is that a safe space to do with your manager? Or how do you know that that's something you'd want to step into? What do you think, Liz? Do you want to go for it?
Sure, that's another good question, but a tricky question. So that's a tough one, because I think primarily your job is your contract and you're getting paid to do your job. So everything else is extracurricular. So while it might make you feel good from a management perspective, they're going to care first and foremost about, well, if you can't produce XYZ on a regular basis, we need you to produce this. That's what you're getting paid for. So while I would encourage it from the perspective of if that's going to make you feel better, yes, from a management perspective, they probably won't be too thrilled with that. That said, if you're at this place where you're trying everything and you're literally having a physical reaction where, oh my God, I can't even get out of bed. I can't do this. I cannot do this. To what Annie was saying earlier, it's probably time to move on. It's probably time to trust your gut, trust your physical feelings, and look for something else. And I know it's easier said than done because there's a financial component. We all need a paycheck. That's the scary part. That's why it can be so emotional and tough when this stuff happens. But I think if you're getting to that point where you're more apathetic than engaged, it's probably time to do whatever you can to find another opportunity, and maybe find another temporary opportunity. There, sometimes there's contractor-based roles for 6 months, but at least it gets you out and you still have a paycheck and you can continue to search for your other job while you're in this in-between space.
Absolutely. And I think the other place is if you can't do it in work because you are struggling to keep up with your just current work, like you're not showing up as well as you'd like, is looking outside of work. And Annie, how do you think your life outside of work, whether it's hobbies or friends or whatever it may be, affects your place at work, affects how you are committed and how you're showing up to your daily job?
That is good. You need to have a life outside of work. I feel like unless you're like the CEO, you need to have and even then you probably still need to, but the ratio of what your life outside of work to your work needs to be very clear, because I think you're only able to pour into your work from that space. And so if you find out that, you work from home and you're not in the office and you just need like to have a reason to hang out with people, like join an organization in your community, join a club, a kayaking club, like join the things that you can fulfill that if that's not something you get from work. But then I think it's also good to just get perspective too. Like I think being too focused on the work community can often make us make very emotional decisions. Not saying our emotions are wrong, but you don't want it to be too swayed by emotions. So having that balance will also give a good emotional distance to work where that at the end of the day, this is something I get to do, but it's not who I am. There's so many other compartments of my life that are also necessary. So it just helps you when you are looking for promotion, but also when you might have to transition out of work. You don't feel like you're losing your sense of self because that's all that's all you've invested in, that's all you've surrounded yourself in. So I think it's definitely good to have outside perspective, have other hobbies, maybe something that has nothing to do with your job. And like that's also a refreshing break and another way to find rest. But then maybe it's something that has to do with your job, and then it just gives you perspective for Monday to Friday. Yeah.
Absolutely. And a question came in it builds off of that is, how do you take care of your mental health while you're remote? And I think both of you have done this, you have been remote, but beyond just the connecting with your coworkers, like what are you actually doing in your day or like in a week? Like what are you physically doing or emotionally doing that's helping you stay mentally well while you are working remote? And I'd love maybe just an example from each of you. If you want, Liz. Oh, well, Liz, I've made you start every time. Annie, could you start? Would you start for us, please?
I'll go. I'll tell you exactly what I did last weekend because this is very true. On my fridge, I wish I had it here. I'll flash it up on the camera. I built a schedule. I drew a couple boxes and I was like, I need a reset because my work time, like the times I work shifted. And so it kind of shifted chores and hanging out with friends and just other things. And so I was like, I'm going to just create, good old block schedule, which I think a lot of us are used to from college, like getting a syllabus that tells you when things are, and then you fill out the spaces with when you want to study or when you want to, grab lunch or when you want to take a nap or whatever. and getting back to that routine. So for me, I started with putting things I really want to do, whether it's like going to church or like, oh, I want to do brunch with my sister on Thursday night at once a month, whatever. You block it out, block out work, and then just see where the other gaps are. And I think that'll quickly tell you whether you have too much work on there and not enough rest, or vice versa. So I think even managing when we work out, I think that's very important, or whether it's like going to the gym or literally just stepping outside to get sunlight, or because sometimes you kind of transition from like work to dinner to sleep and you haven't stepped out. So being very intentional about when you're getting like gym or exercise or outside time, getting people time. So whether it's phone calls with non-work people or like catching up with people and doing dinner or whatever, like creating time for that. And then just task-oriented things. So literally like your chores, you're cooking your food, you're doing your laundry. But like being very, the same way we schedule meetings and we block those times out, doing that with your personal life will that's one less thing you have to worry about, because you can just lean back on your schedule and you know that you've created a balance that works for you.
Awesome. Liz, what do you do? What's your day or week, or what's your positive mental health?
Yeah, very similar response. I take my dog out on a walk about twice a day. It's only for 20 minutes or so, but it gets my blood flowing and it gets me out of my chair and it gets me outside. Maybe you don't have a dog. Walking alone is still productive, in my opinion. I think there's definitely something to be said for getting up out of your desk and completely stepping out if you can, or just going downstairs or wherever your office might be. I think that helps. I'm also fortunate enough where I have a home office. I have a room I can use. During COVID, I was in an apartment and I worked from basically right next to my front door. And that was really distracting. So I would also recommend, if you're not in a position where you have a whole room that you can declare your office, finding some space that you can somewhat declare an office that's also not central to the rest of your environment, so that when you are turning off, you're turning off and it's not like you're visually seeing your computer all the time. And finally, I would just offer, the importance of working out if you can. I know that's not for everyone, but I do think, I'm not the biggest fan, but I always find that if I do some sort of physical activity, it does indeed make me feel better. Finally, if you are able, if you're really just like, oh my gosh, I sit here every day and I need something different, go to a Starbucks, go to a local coffee shop, and just, even if it's not for the full day, get out for a couple hours. When I'm feeling stagnant, I'll do that and it'll give me like a breath of fresh air, I find. So
I love it. Well, thank you both. So, wildly, we are at the end of our delightful discussion. So I'm gonna start to wrap us up, but before I do, I just want to check in. Is there anything, any last comment, any last piece that you feel that's impacted you or that you think is important to share? And Annie, I'll start with you if you have anything.
Yeah, I think we touched on it a little bit, but I'll just reiterate about just generational friendships, maybe I would phrase it that way. But be okay with connecting with people that are not in your age group, and that is vice versa. So if you're in your 40s, don't be afraid to talk to an employee or a coworker or a peer that's in their 20s, and vice versa. And also learn how to communicate in different styles. So if you're used to texting, try calling some people. If you're used to email, try doing video chats, and vice versa. I think on the like recent college space, like when we get interns or we get recent college grads, the gap of like knowledge with how to send emails and how to communicate effectively in email is very large. And so I think like practicing with your friends, with your family on like sending emails, getting one of your friends to look at an email before you hit send, like these are normal things. We all do it. We might not say it. We all do it. Like get someone to look at that email before you hit send. And I think on the other side, like everyone is very mobile. And so whether you're traveling, you're working from home, like texting and like Microsoft Teams or Skype on the phone, like chatting quickly, I think that's also something that some of our more tenured employees are often shy with engaging in. But again, that's something that you can practice with your family, practice with your other coworkers that you trust. And that I think will help just communicating up, down, around, like with any employee that wants to reach out to you, you kind of have these tools to work with.
Love it. Liz, you want to take over?
Yeah, sure. I love Danny's examples. I'm going to go a little even broader and more cliche, but believe in yourselves, work hard and look for what you want, but be open for change. I think one of the biggest things I learned that I kind of struggled with was realizing as I enter a new position, it's not what I thought it was. And in some cases, it wasn't what I thought it was in the best possible way. And that surprised me. So just be willing to be willing to change your perspective, and that can be scary, but it's okay. And realize that at the same time, you also might enter your dream job, quote unquote, and realize, oh my God, I spent 4 years of college doing this and I can't stand this. And be okay with that, even though it's terrifying. Know that there's room for everyone. I really firmly believe there is a job out there for everyone, just like there's a partner out there for everyone. Like Annie said earlier, there are so many jobs that you don't even know. I didn't even know existed until I started working, and I was like, oh my God, that's a job. Someone does that. So just keep your eyes and ears open and be willing to try something new and be okay with it maybe not being what you thought it was going to be.
Absolutely. Thank you both so much for your time. We really appreciate it here at Western, and I will hand it back over to James.
This was really fun conversation, and I thank all of you for doing this morning. I think these are a lot of wise words here that I think a lot of people should listen to and take to heart. So thank you. And thank you for joining us today for Western Insights. This and previous Western Insight sessions are all available online for your late night viewing needs. You can curl up with a little YouTube and catch up on all of our past sessions of this. We will be sending you an email shortly with a link to all of those sessions, further resources from our panel, and an invitation to, of course, give your feedback on this session. From all of us at Western Washington University and the College of Business and Economics, we want to thank you for being here today. We also want to thank the Western Alumni Association and the Western Foundation for their support of this series. And we know that they would like us to also thank you, all of you who chose to financially support the university as part of this effort as well. We hope you all have an amazing, amazing day. Thank you so much.